Hi, Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends. I thought I'll make this video because I think it's an honest question that one of the viewers was asked. They deserve to know who is this guy telling us to revise some of the core essential practices that we've had, that we were regarding as sacred all our lives. And so, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to introduce myself. Inshallah, I hope I can win your trust. I hope I can illustrate to you that I'm not some random guy on the internet that is fooling around and playing around with the things that you and I regard as sacred. Let me give you a bit of a biography. Then also, I think importantly, I need to share with you what you've asked me is, what is your minhaj? The first group of Muslims, even before the Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah was created, was the rationalists, the Mu'tazila. And the Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah was created when the Ahli Sunnah broke away from that rationalist group. You must remember the rationalist group, the Mu'tazila did not break away from the Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah. The Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah broke away from the rationalists because they were uncomfortable with philosophy, with rational thinking, and they formed the first sect. Before the Ahli Sunnah there was no sects. The Shia adopted some of the principles of the Mu'tazila, as I always state, but also added a lot of inventions. But let me take it even further back. The first rationalist was our dear beloved Prophet Ibrahim. May God be pleased with him, or alayhi salam, peace be upon him. Because he looked at the sun and he said, maybe the sun is my Lord. And when the sun set, he said, no, it's not my Lord. So he looked at the stars. You see, what he did was he rationalized. That is called rational. That is called tallying, corroborating what you are seeing with your eyes with what you are thinking and what you are making sense of the world. So Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam was a rationalist. Moses was a rationalist. He came to Pharaoh. He rationalized with Pharaoh. He didn't tell Pharaoh, you have to do this or I'll kill you. Or you have to do this or you'll go to hell. He told him that the one who sustains you, because somebody has to sustain you. And he says, so you also have to have a Lord. And that is why there has to be a God that is supreme, that is above all of us. You know what I mean? So the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam was a rationalist. He came to the people. The Qur'an is replete with arguments of what the Prophet comes to them with and says, what do these things help you? How do these effigies, these statues, how do they help you? The Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam used rational methodologies or methods to convince people. He never said, I'm going to form an army and kill you and fight you and I'm going to lose my... He never lost his temper. The Quran says if they argue with you, if they rude with you, say salamun. Just say peace. And there's no instruction to go to war with him. In fact, even when he was in Medina, he used to rationalize. There was rational arguments with the Christians, with the Jews. And so for you to come and ask, what is my minhaj? It's a very good question, but my minhaj is to obey the Quran, where the Quran says, do they not rationalize? Do they not consider? Do they not make sense of things? And that phrase, do they not make sense? That phrase is so common in the Quran. If you read the Quran, you'll find it all over the place. Knowledge and understanding and making sense of the world is a gift. It is the greatest gift from Allah. It is the gift of having a mind, having a heart, having a sense of what is good, what is bad. And that is the greatest gift. And anyone who takes that gift away from you is taking you away from your natural inclination, that fitra, the natural disposition. And that word fitra also, fitratullah, is in the Quran. And if you read the verse about it, then it means the nature in which you were created. And man is a brain with a body attached to it. And the most powerful part of a man is not the body, it's the brain. because the brain controls every aspect of the body. How can we abandon our brain? How can we abandon our mind? And in the Quran, it often refers to the heart. How can we abandon what comes from our heart? So that was just in defense of rationalism, and to argue that we as Muslims, we have drifted away from rationalism. Because those who ask me, what is your minhaj? There's only one minhaj other than the rationalist minhaj, and that is the non-rationalist minhaj. Now, the non-rationalist minhaj is what is called the salafist or the Sunnite minhaj. Now, what does that minhaj entail? That minhaj says that knowledge is a knowledge of the texts.
Them with goodness. And this is the definition of being a Salafi. What is a Salafi? A Salafi is what I just told you from these ayat. A Salafi is someone who says, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you have given your bliss to. Salafi means that you want to follow Salaf al-Salih. We don't have a sect or a leader, and we don't accept anything other than as Salaf al-Salih, because they did not accept anything but that. So we follow their way. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to follow their way. Wallahi ya ikhwa, if you open the books of Aqidah with the Isnad al-Sahih, with the authentic chains of narration, to how the Salaf al-Salih dealt with the people of bid'ah and whims and desires, like the ones who say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have a hand, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not above his throne, and you will see an amount of harshness that you did not imagine. You'd be like a Salaf al-Salih. You'd be like a Salaf al-Salih. This is how harsh they were and strict. Yes, this is how. So, just because you did not open these books and you did not figure out the way of a Salaf,
like the ancient texts, the texts that go back to the people in the first generation following the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, and the second generation and the third generation. So the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, and the Tabi'i. Now they regard those three generations as the golden three generations, the sacred generations. And any text that emanates from those generations is regarded as sacred. And any action that you want to embark on, whether it is to sleep, wake, walk, work, whatever you do, any aspect of your life has to be in corroboration with what can be related from that era. Now that is also the era, according to the Salafist interpretation or minhaj, which solidified or captured or encoded the life, the hadith, or the exemplary conduct, as it is claimed, of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. So when the Salafist tells you what is my minhaj, his minhaj is to refer back to those generations. Now there are hundreds of thousands of texts, of words, of narratives going back to those generations. And if you only start to look at it, you'll find a great deal of contradiction within them. I'm excluding the Qur'an for now out of that massive body of literature. You will find a massive amount of contradictions. Like, I'll give you an example. The Prophet says at one stage, Inni tariq fikum as-saqalain. I leave for you the two heavy-weighted legacies. There is the Qur'an, and secondly, there is the Sunnah. Then there's a different version of the Hadith in those same texts that says, Inni tariq fikum as-saqalain, kitabullah wa itrati ahlul bayti. Itrati. I leave for you two legacies, heavy legacies, the Quran, the Book of God, and my family. What a massive difference, because now what the Salafist will do is he will have to now do what is called, he will have to argue to bring those two hadiths into conformity. Ta'wil. They will make ta'wil. They will now argue in a way that makes those two hadiths actually the same. And they will say, look, the family of the Prophet actually equals the Sunnah. And the word itrati doesn't mean family, it means everyone. I don't know how. They'll use various ways. But the point of this video was not to dissuade you from the Salafist. The best Salafist in the world is actually ISIS, my friends. ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Please, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not insulting the Salafists. They truly are the best. Now the Salafists are going to tell you, no, but they are, they are not Salafists because they make khuruj. They make khuruj. They go out against the king. And if you go out against the king, you're not a proper Salafist. Because the Salafists are also divided between those who make khuruj, those who rise up against the king, and those who don't make khuruj. And then they link that to the Khawarij, which is another sect. But the general Salafists, the Saudis, came to power because they made khuruj against the Ottoman king. So the Saudis, the Saud family, they were from the deserts of Najd, and they rose up against the established Muslim authority, the Sharif of Makkah, which was an appointment by the Caliph. So this whole thing of if you make khuruj, then you're not a Salafist. The very Salafists that argue that they are capable and ready to make khuruj, to rise against their own kings. And if they get half a chance to rise against the king of Jordan or the king of wherever, they will rise against them. They are the people who rose against Gaddafi. They are the people who rose, and Gaddafi was a Sunni. So don't, but enough of the Salafists. They are such a contradictory bunch of people, and the only thing they have going for them is they have a very good global network. They are well sponsored by some rich Saudis and other Gulf states. They have good access to funding, and they have long beards, and they run a good cult, and people associate with them because they seem well organized, and their logic seems to be, we link ourselves to the Salaf, to the text, and the text can't be wrong, and it's just a whole lot of, it doesn't make sense. I don't want to be more stronger in my language than that, but there is no sense in it, because one of the key problems with it is that they will go to Christians on Speaker's Corner, right, in London. The Salafists will go to Speaker's Corner and try to convince Christians and other religions why Islam is right, and they will use a bunch of logic they will use, that the Qur'an has got no contradictions, that there's no 3-in-1 Trinity. They will use a bunch of logic. But once you're Muslim, then you're supposed to discard all that logic. So you only use logic at Speaker's Corner to make them say the Shahada, or take the Shahada, as people say. But once you take the Shahada, you're not allowed to use logic anymore. Now if you ask a question, listen, Sheikh, but why is this hadith saying this, and that hadith is saying so, it's opposites, this hadith is saying the impossible, why, then they shut you down. Listen, you are questioning the texts, and you're not allowed to question Bukhari, you're not allowed to question. So for me, that's one of the biggest contradictions, is that you're only allowed to be rationalist when they want to make you say Shahada, but when you say Shahada, then you're not allowed to be rationalist anymore. Another big contradiction is this Sheikh Albani, the great scholar that lived contemporary now, the biggest, most deeply learned hadith scholar, the greatest Salafist of our time, praised by all the top Salafists, right? Albani. He was lecturing in Saudi Arabia. He's originally from Europe. I think he's from Albania, as his name states. He came, and in the last 50 years, he used the methodology of the Salafists, in other words, the methodology of jarh and ta'deel, the methodology of vetting different narrators of hadiths, vetting them. That's the science of jarh and ta'deel, vetting the narrators. Jarh means to impugn, ta'deel means to to vouch for them. So the methodology of impugning or vouching for narrators, because that's a big science in hadith. Hadith depends on it. Every hadith has a string of narrators attached to it, which numbers 5, 6, 7. Bukhari is not the guy who spoke to the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. Bukhari spoke to a guy who listened from a guy. So the science of jarh and ta'deel is a massive science. It is one of the key sciences of the Salafists. Now this guy Albani, he was deeply immersed in that. The guy literally was swimming in the books. If you look at the pictures of him, the books were like, he was like neck high in books. And Albani is the type of scholar that you must be to understand your religion according to the Salafist way. So nobody can be an Albani. I promise you. You can never spend 50 years learning all the hadiths, or almost all the hadiths. There's so many. So it's impossible to be the standard of becoming a Muslim according to the minhaj of the Salafist is almost impossible. It's almost no matter what. So they keep their hands here, and they keep the beard messy and long, and they have other habits which they do. They walk, they don't follow a mazhab. They follow just the hadith or the sunnah. But you have to be so deeply read. You have to spend 50 years of your life full time studying all the hadiths. If you can't, then you must follow a sheikh. So what they are creating is automatically a priesthood. They are institutionalizing a priesthood, because you can never study all those hadiths, so you need a guy to help you with the hadiths. And we're not talking about a fraternity of knowledgeable people. We're talking about a priesthood. A fraternity of science and knowledge is based on rational ideas. And the whole idea of jarh and ta'deel, there's no rationality in it. It is simply the people that agree with me and that I think spoke the truth. Every person, even Abu Huraira, the greatest narrator, the most prolific narrator, has got jarh against him. There is serious impugning of his character by no less than the second Caliph Umar. There is serious impugnment against his character, and you know it and I know it. So let's not play games about it. There's other Sahabis that were in the employ of the Umayyads, that Muawiyah paid to make up lies. Serious impugnment against them also. So the standard is not whether somebody is believable, not believable, but whether somebody pleases the orthodoxy, pleases the king. Now this guy, Albani, this is my point. He studied for 50 years, and what he did was he overturned the credibility of numerous hadiths in no less than Bukhari. Listen to what I'm saying. A man who lived in the 2000s, in the 1990s, was able to overturn the mighty Bukhari. Now what does that tell you? That tells you that for 1,100 years, people were acting on hadiths in Bukhari, shaping their religion, shaping the law, viewing with divine value the words of Bukhari. They viewed it as next to the word of Allah. And it was mistaken, it was wrong. What they did was invalid, it was baseless. And that is what Albani does. In our times, he overturns some of the validity, some of the strong so-called sahih hadiths in Bukhari. So I'm giving you another reason why I do not find any credibility in the Salafist way of thinking. And that is the only other minhaj. You see, there's another minhaj in the Muslim world, which is the Sufi, or the I would call it the Sufi Islam, and the Madhabist Islam, and the Asharist expression of Islam. Now, the Ashari minhaj is slightly different, because the Ashari minhaj says that we look at the Nas, we look at the Hadith and so on, but we balance that with rational, or with some sort of rational thinking, which they call qiyas, which is a sort of analogy, an analogical reasoning. So limited reasoning, but not too much. Because the idea of the Ash'ari school of thought is the Ash'ari school of thought, or the Sunni school that you all know, the Ahli Sunnah school or Jamaat, is a verse. People on the Ahli Sunnah, which is 80% of the Muslim world, I would say, they have a dislike, they have an aversion for the Saudi Salafist way because of its rigidity, because of the minhaj that is tight, that is firm, that is solid. We go to the text and we don't compromise on that. Whereas the Salafist, or the Ash'ari school, they were always the school of government, and you find situations where you cannot be as harsh as the Salafist. And so it's a school that has learned to be Salafism mild, Salafism the softer version. So we do have the holy books, and we do have Bukhari, but we're gonna be a bit more open-minded. We don't, if Allah says, if Bukhari says you must throw the woman with stones that was guilty of adultery, the married woman. No. In Egypt, we'll relax that. So in Egypt, the Azhar, the Al-Azhar Institute, the most credible, or I would call it the most auspicious or prestigious place of learning in the Muslim world, they are based on the Ash'ari minhaj. And that minhaj, I hope, and I'm not an expert in this, I know enough to carry me through and to know what is wrong. I don't have to be a professor in mathematics to know that 1 + 1 is not 5. So I can point out simple errors in these mighty schools to tell myself that I don't like it. The same with you. If somebody tells you here's something to drink, and you take a sip and it tastes rancid, and it tastes rotten, and it smells rotten, you're going to drink it. So you don't need to be a professor in biology and chemistry to know that that's not good for you. You can smell the smell test. And I can tell you now, the smell test, Salafism fails the smell test, and it fails the logic test. Why does it fail the smell test? Because if I look at ISIS and Al Qaeda, these people are rancid. They are horrible. They're terrible people. They're violent. They are illogical in their actions. And so I don't take to Salafism. And don't tell me there's two types of, that is Salafism. If you want to be a Salafist, you must accept ISIS and Al Qaeda as expressions of Salafism. They are doing nothing wrong. They are making khuruj, but any Salafist will make khuruj, as we see now in Syria. They make khuruj. They are violent. They go against the king, as the Saudi kings did. They attacked the Sharif of Makkah. They ousted him in the early 1900s. There's only one type of Salafism, and that is the Salafism of ISIS. And don't complicate the thing. Don't give me an hour speech to tell me there's not. That is the Salafism that is there. The second, the Ash'ari, those are the Muslims that we can live with, because they are the governments, they are the people, they are us. Many of us, I grew up in a community where it was not as harsh as the ISIS community. They don't force, nobody ever forced my sister or my family to don black outfits to cover them from head to toe. Nobody ever did that to me. It is more of a palatable way to experience Islam as an Ash'ari. Abu Hanifa is the most prolific, it's the biggest madhab. Abu Hanifa. And Abu Hanifa was not a hadithist. Go and read your history. Abu Hanifa disliked hadith. Abu Hanifa said that I much more rather prefer to use the sunnah as I see the people perform it and the way the masses are acting than to go and find an obscure way that says we should do it that way. So he regarded sunnah as more of a living, transmitted tradition, a living, transmitted convention. And by the way, that is the way of Imran Hussein, of the word of Abdul Alim Siddiqui and his son-in-law. That is the Ashari, or the madhabs, the Hanafi, Shafi, Maliki, whatever. Obviously, the Hanbali madhab is more associated with Salafism. So the three, I would say the three madhab, Shafi'i would be very strongly leaning towards Salafism. But most Muslims, 80% of Muslims are Hanafis, and the Hanafis are more or less more rational than the Salafis. But now, what is my position? You see, let me give you some biography, because I just like to speak philosophy. I never like to speak about myself. I'm a regular. I was born and I'm raised, and I went to madrasa, and I learned the Shafi'i way. Just in a normal small town, I went to my country is not a Muslim country. My country is it used to be a Christian country. It is now more of a secular atheist country. People used to go to church on Sunday. The bells would ring everywhere around my house. I would hear the bells of the churches. I don't hear church bells anymore. The general people don't care about religion. The Muslims are still religious, but their way of being religious has also changed. We used to be religious in a sense of having a community, going to mosque, having our lives revolved around the mosque. But we always had this dualistic life. You have school, and that is my secular school, and I was good at school. I was regarded as like an above average child in my class. When I was about 11 years old, my mother moved me from a Christian school. So I went to a Christian school where I learned the daily prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, and sang Christmas hymns. And my teacher was Christian. I was the only Muslim in the class. My principal was a preacher or a pastor. I was then relocated from that school to a Muslim school. And in this Muslim school, my class was now Muslim. And the teachers were Muslim. And we were taught Islam in parallel with our normal classes. And so that, in my early years, in my first, years, I used to also learn how to recite the Qur'an and to recite Arabic, etc. So then I was at this Muslim school, and from this Muslim school I moved to a high school, again a non-Muslim high school, and I managed to enter university to study science. And at university I studied science. It took me a while, because at university I became involved with the anti-apartheid struggle, because at school already I was agitating against inequalities, right? So at school we used to then have various acts of resistance, like demonstrations in the streets. And at that time South Africa was a fascist country. If you do anything, the police comes and they just simply attack you with rubber, like what you see in Israel, and they just shoot at you, they kill some of you, they throw gas on you, and that is how they treated us as black people in South Africa. I regard myself as a black person in South Africa, because we are African. We're born here. My grandfather came from India, and my mother came from India. Half of her father came from India. But there's a lot of local ancestry we have. We have Malay ancestry, and if you look at my face, you're looking at somebody who has got African, Malay, and Indian in this face. You see, there's those three. They have Khoisan, Malay, and Indian in this face. the story then continues. I was active at school. We fought the apartheid police, these white guys that came and shot at us and threw us with tear gas, and we had this skirmish in the streets. And I went to university under these circumstances, under these conditions. And at university, I just became more radical, and I joined, groups and organizations. And after an incomplete study at university, I went to teach. And as a teacher, as a junior teacher, I just brought that radicalism with me, and we organized, and lo and behold, I was made a science teacher of all things. So I had access to a lot of material in the school. And during my year of teaching, I was arrested for teaching people how to manufacture gunpowder and creating acid bombs which people used to attack the police, the apartheid police with. And I was arrested for attacking some of the installations, burning down some government installations. I was arrested for that. I was facing a 15-year jail sentence for that. Fortunately, I had extremely good defense team. Mind you, I had a white advocate that defended me, so we weren't racist in that sense that all whites were the enemy. But the system definitely regarded the apartheid system as the enemy. I had very good defense, and I was saved from that 15 years jail sentence. But they still arrested me without charge and kept me in prison for 3 months just to keep me out of circulation. So I did spend 3 months in a cell as a solitary prisoner, and I sat there and I had a lot of time to reflect about my life, about my deen, because I was a Muslim, and I felt Islam is the most important thing to me. Allah, God, is the most important thing to me. He kept me in that cell when other men broke down and cried and were carried out on stretchers with mentally breaking down, powerful men. I somehow kept myself going because I would make my salah, and I would make zuhr, and I would be in constant communication with Allah. And this, the lessons I learned in madrasa about, making dua, making salah, I took it very, very to heart. I was in constant communication with my only companion, which was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah kept me going for 3 months in the cell alone, with only brief moments of coming out. Even when I was pulled out and a gun was kept against my head by the police, by the apartheid police, and one cop was telling me one day, if you don't speak, I'll shoot you full of holes. You'll be so full of holes, you'll get pneumonia. The air will go through you and you'll catch pneumonia. I mean, such nonsense they spoke. And then they threatened to put this terrible apparatus on my ears, on my face, which would apparently make you deaf. And what I only had my Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through those terrible, terrible times. And all they wanted from me was to reveal the names of people that instructed me to carry out the acts of sabotage and operations against the state. They needed me to give up names. They knew I did those things, but they couldn't find me guilty in a court of law, and so now they wanted to get the names of the commanders, my commanders, and I never ever let them know the names of those commanders. I can now tell you that some of those commanders were Ahmad Qasim, my teacher, my beloved teacher, that he's passed away. But he was truly one of the commanders, and he would decide on what we needed to do. And the instructions would come via a chain of command, and it would come to us like junior soldiers, and we would act on those commands. And so those were the years of being active in a military way, in a structured way, and those were the years in which I was also arrested and kept in the dungeons of the oppressor. And those were the years in which I discovered that Allah will never ever let you down. Will never ever let you down. Those were the years that I joined a Sufi Jamaat, a Sufi Jamaat, Naqshbandi group, and I became a dervish, a member of the Naqshbandi, and I had a sheikh. His name was Sheikh Abdul Rahman da Costa, and he taught me many things, and he inducted me into the Naqshbandi order, and taught me about discipline, living beyond my body, and he taught me those aspects of the Sufi expression of Islam. Because they were tough years. They were years in which we were challenged. Our lives were in danger every day. We were incarcerated at times. I was arrested 3 or 4 times. And that is just a sort of a quick overview of my young years, the years between the age of 18 or 17 and the age of 25 before I got married. And those years, I can tell you now, they were years that included challenges to myself mentally, where I was mentally challenged for a short period, and I broke down at one stage because of the amount of trauma that I've experienced, that I've felt, going. And I just thank Allah. I thank Allah for carrying me through those years and bringing me out to the other side. When I was a man of 25, I found a wonderful woman. I found a woman who did not judge me, because in the year 1988-89, I was still judged, because I was not a good Muslim in the sense of Muslims where you should not care about the non-Muslims. And I left out that piece of my biography. We were in constant conflict with the Muslim authorities, with the Muslim preachers, because the Muslim preachers were telling us that, why are you putting any effort in these African townships? Why are you doing any effort into these in these black townships? Because these blacks are all going to be communist, and you are helping the communists. And they were, the Muslims are always, they're good Muslims, but they love the authority. They never question the authority. And during the apartheid years of this country, the Muslims were squarely on the side of apartheid, with a few exceptions. The Muslims leadership, I'm talking Muslims generally, the Muslim leadership were always apologetic for apartheid. They bowed down to an evil system, to the system of Fir'aun. They were in subservience and in submission to that system. You did get people who did not, who gave a middle finger to the system, like Sheikh, our beloved Hamati Imam Abdullah Harun, well known in Turkey if you're watching from Turkey. I married a very, very good, logical, rational wife, and she accepted me, because most women in the Muslim community would look at me as a bit of a problem character, somebody who's against the system, probably a communist, probably, because in 79 we also tagged a Shi'i, because then the Muslims found a new, and constantly attacked. I was thrown out of the mosque one day. In the year, I was married already, I think, when we asked for the mosque or the madrasa, which is an outbuilding, to be used to educate the community around the mosque, non-Muslims, Muslims, whatever, about the political system, because there was an election coming up and people didn't know who to vote for. And we said, look, we want to invite all the parties to come and address the community, like, election debate of sorts. And they just promised us the mosque, and on the day, the wall next to the mosque, and on the day when the people arrived, the guy who had the keys just disappeared, and he wouldn't answer his phone. And we had to, with an embarrassed face, tell the people that the venue is no longer available, and the speakers and everyone had to go home. Now, that Friday in the mosque, the Sheikh was speaking about not breaking your promise and, that type of thing. And I put my hand up and I said, but what happened to me last Sunday was a breaking of promise. How do we deal with that and how do we prevent it from happening again? And he said to me, shut up. This is the mosque. You don't ask questions here. And he got some of the henchmen to come and take me and carry me out of the mosque. Now, my friends, I'm telling you who is Anwar Shaik. I'm Anwar Shaik, abused by my Muslim community, who loves his creator, who tries to make sense of the world, who tries to see that there's an enemy, there's an Fir'aun that is ruling, that is oppressing the people, that is shooting innocent people, that is trying to stand up against that enemy, and who finds that the Muslim community is judging me for doing that, because that's not in the Hadith, that's not in the Sunnah. We don't do that. But meanwhile, they are making sujood to that evil system. They are yielding to that system. When I was married a few years now, working as in an NGO, having completed more further studies, I think graduating, me and my wife and our baby, we set off for Egypt. And I decided, I was funded by some of my brothers who Allah has gifted, my own, siblings. Allah gifted them with the means to support me, and they decided, because we were always in the trenches together, me, my brothers, we always stuck together like this. We never ever, we have our own arguments, but you can come to any one of us and we will talk to you the same language. And so these brothers of mine, these siblings of mine, they said to me, look, these guys are threatening not to bury us when we die. The Sheikh, he's praying to God that we must die. This is what we got in my Muslim community. I had the leader of that community praying, may God strike them down, may God, and we will not bury them, we will not teach them. We were boycotted in this town. Why? Because first of all, we were seen as communists, and then later on we were seen as the Shia, because we're trying to be rational about things. We're trying to question Muawiyah. We're trying to question Abu Hurairah. No, now you Shia. Because Muawiyah is a golden Sahabi, even though he killed the most Muslims of any Sahabi. He's a great Sahabi. So we were Shia, we were communist, we were just unsavory, and then we were chased up and we were threatened. Then my brother said to me, Anwar, listen, man, these guys are threatening not to bury us. There's several people with us. Our numbers would number, because we have friends and other people that were part of us in this town, and we numbered maybe 100 people. If you look at our children, our friends, the people who became part of us, and we were all ousted from the rest of the Muslim community, and nobody would greet us, shake our hands, nothing like that. If you see a guy in the street, he looks away. That's the treatment I got from Muslims. And so they said to me, it would be a great thing if you can go to an Al-Azhar University and learn what is Islam, because they're telling us what is Islam and we don't know ourselves. We can't argue back with these guys. They don't understand Arabic. We can't argue back with them. But even for simple things like burials, go and learn how we should bury ourselves, how we should name our children, how we should, whatever. Just try and learn the basics so that you can be, at the very least, a preacher for us. That was the original idea. Come and be a preacher for us, a Muslim preacher for us. And that was the original intention, that I left for Egypt in 1991, where I stayed for 2 years. I returned in June of 1993. And in Egypt, the religion was demystified for me. Islam, which was a mythical idea, which was a large and unattainable, idea, was demystified. I sat in the class, I saw the teachers, I listened to them. Gradually, I understood more and more the Arabic. And I started understanding and seeing the picture. I made some very, very close friends that are till today my best colleagues in terms of scholarship, but also personally. Sheikh Shahid Mati is often here, and there were a group of others also. And the discussions that we had after class was actually more valuable than the discussions we got in class. The characters I met in Egypt, because there were some very knowledgeable characters, some very learned men sitting around there, and we could go to their homes and we could just get into their ideas. Now, I didn't take what they call permission to teach anybody's book, because that is how it works. You go to the Middle East, you go to Morocco, you go to Algeria, you learn, you get a very highly learned sheikh, Sufi sheikh or whatever sheikh, and you get license, to teach that sheikh's books. I didn't do that. That wasn't my intention. I'm not a blind follower. I was never a blind follower. I was never going to reproduce somebody's book, because that was the idea. I'm schooled in science, modern science. I'm schooled in mathematics. I'm schooled in astronomy. I'm here in Egypt, and I'm trying to make sense of Islam from that perspective. I come from a secular society, a country that developed the nuclear bomb, 6 nuclear bombs in South Africa. I'm coming from a country that did the first heart transplant. And I was, okay, we were anti-apartheid, but not all whites were evil. And many white people, I was at a white university, and I had white professors and I had white students in my class. And that was me. I'm not a ignoramus that's going to take somebody's book that he wrote in 1500 and reproduce that book. I don't see value in that. I'm part of a world, of a Western world, technically, because South Africa was very much part of the Western world, that believes that knowledge is alive. Knowledge is not dead. Knowledge does not sit in the 1500s. Knowledge is something which is produced, reproduced, and recreated all the time. The argument of Hegel that there is no such a thing as being, there is only becoming. There is no such a thing as being. You can't say something is. You should say something is becoming. Because that what you regard as being is in constant evolution, is in constant emergence. You understand? And so if you say, this is a cell phone, then you should not say, when you hold up the cell phone, which is the little old cell phone with numbers, 9 numbers and a small screen, that is a cell phone. That is not a cell phone anymore. A cell phone now is a smartphone. It's a device with one big screen. So knowledge, similarly, is always evolving. And I'm sitting in Egypt, and people are telling me you should take permission from this sheikh or that sheikh, and I can't accept that. Even the Al-Azhar has rejected that outlook on knowledge, because the Al-Azhar is faced with new challenges every year. The Darul, what is it called, the Ifta, the House of Fatwas, or the Institute of Fatwas. They cannot, in no way in Egypt can they be stuck to one guy's book, because the challenges are endless, and it is constant, and it is relentless, and it is emerging every year. And any idiot that says that Islam is locked up in one book that you should, get licensed to teach is a fool. And I'm not that. Right? So I went to Egypt. Islam was demystified to me. I realized that what is happening here is that these people are teaching a text, a book that is reproduced for centuries. And there is no way that we can recreate the Muslim world, because Egypt itself is a backward country. I'm sorry to use these words. It is, as Donald Trump says, and this is YouTube, this is not a video for children. Egypt is a shithole, my friends, and I agree with Donald Trump, as is Nigeria, as is Libya, as is Algeria, these Muslim countries, as is Pakistan. Don't hate me for telling you the truth, and Donald Trump, we need to give him his due when he speaks the truth. These are shithole countries. Muslim countries are by and large shitholes. I was in Iran. Iran is not a shithole. Iran is has overcome that status, honestly. And I'm not paid by Iran to say that. Go and seek if there's a Muslim Arab university in the top 500 universities of the world. No, nothing. Maybe Malaysia can claim to have escaped that status. And some parts of Indonesia, I have a lot of people who visited Malaysia, and I can say Malaysia is doing good, is doing well. But as for the others, my friends, you don't want to be in these countries. And I connected the backwardness, the filth, the lack of order, the lack of discipline, the chaos on the streets, the chaos in all the institutions. I related back to the inability to have a proper philosophy of what is knowledge. Because it all starts with knowledge, and then from knowledge you have practice. But if you fail to develop a healthy philosophy of knowledge, then your practice cannot be healthy. And these Muslim countries, they sanctify ignorance. They sanctify, like in Egypt, the ancient books, and they desanctify anything else by implication. So they sanctify, the seven waters, but they don't sanctify, like, how do you not pollute your rivers? Because the Nile suffers serious pollution, and they look at things that are in the books, but because the books don't speak about modern problems like pollution, like how to, in a mega city like Cairo, there's no Islam, there's no sacred knowledge that they could relate back to the practice of the citizen. Do you see what I mean? So the citizen is bereft of a sacred practice. Now, if you look at Sweden, whom I know well because my daughter spent a lot of time there and I heard a lot from her, and there are certain things that are sacred. They don't call it sacred, divinely sacred, but a man will drive in a certain way, and a man will not discard his rubbish on the pavement that is sacred, or a man will not go and discard sewage into the river that is supplying people with water, because that is safe. They have different ways of belief, of institutionalizing behavior. Certain behaviors they regard as sacred, as we won't do it. We will never do it. You can never get me to cheat. I'll sell you a car that is broken. It's sacred to me that I don't sell you a car that's broken or patched up. But the Muslims have not extended what is sacred to those realms. You see, what is good and virtuous behavior is just what is in the books, and you can't have any sacred behavior outside of the books. So Muslims are the biggest polluters. Muslims are the most antisocial people when it comes to dishonesty at the business level. And I'm not exaggerating, my friends. Please, when you go to a Muslim country, you'll find that they have no qualms with being dishonest at a very, very small level and at the microscope, at the low level. Right. I couldn't reconcile. In fact, I figured out that the country and all its misery, all its backwardness, all its tyranny, because it's a tyrannical country. The president decides for everyone. The suffering of the masses there, the hunger, the poverty. Generally, I started seeing that Islam is not unrelated. There is not a lack of causality or relationship, or there is a corollary, a correlation between the knowledge, the understanding, the philosophical outlook of the population, which is Islam, and the backwardness of that society. Now you're going to tell me, but Anwar, there are other countries also, like look at Malawi, look at Vietnam. No, I promise you, these countries are actually developing. These countries are growing, and we as Muslim countries are still lagging behind. I made the connection that in the perception of Islam, there's a problem, and it is causing this backwardness, this ignorance. And the problem with the Islam that we have is that it has discarded common sense. It has discarded the idea of what is in the common good. And the term in the Quran is the word ma'ruf. And the way that has taken place is through misinterpreting of words, and also in taking weak hadiths. But let me not get ahead of myself. When I came out of Egypt, I was pretty much a preacher for my community. I was there to bury people. I was there to wash people when they died. I was there because the mainstream guys were excommunicating us, were taking us out of the community. But that excommunication didn't, we eventually left the town. After I came back, I left that small town and came to the big city. And in the big city, obviously, there's a lot more ideas floating around, and the mainstream preachers are not able to control the community or the society to that extent. So in the big city, we joined and we formed institutions. One of the big institutions we started was the Islamic Unity Convention, which was set up as a parallel and how can I put it, as a parallel and improved way of organizing the Muslim masses. So there was the traditional institutions, and we wanted to create an institution that was more rational, more focused on what is rational, instead of just being blind adherents. I was accepted as a member of the National Ulama Council, which was the name of the institution, or the National Ulama Council was a branch or a organ of the Islamic Unity Convention. And the Islamic Unity Convention was quite an elaborate institution. It had more than 1,000 organizational members at one stage. I'm not sure what the current numbers are, but it for the first time was part of a collective, of a grand collective, and the leader of that movement was Imam Ahmad Qasim, and there were other great people involved also there. And so that became a very powerful vehicle for many years. In fact, the Islamic Unity Convention was able to obtain a license to operate a radio station on the FM frequency, and was able to spread its ideas beyond our group. And so many tens of thousands of people took to Radio 786. We brought overseas the radio, we brought overseas experts here, and we just created the most beautiful institution in that Islamic Unity Convention with the radio station, Radio 786, still functional. And I ended up becoming one of the guests on the radio, a regular guest. I did some programs about history. I had a big hit with the Battle of Badr, which was a story that tells of the events around the day of Badr, when that battle took place, the spirit of the Muslims. And I was frequently on radio. For 2 years I appeared on the radio. I did some political programs, and I also did some religious programs. My speciality was always history. I looked at the historical, at people, persons. And so Radio 786 and the Islamic Unity Convention was very, very close to my heart. I was a fully accepted member. I was no longer an outcast or a excommunicated. We were powerful. By that time, the apartheid system had been overthrown in 1994, and the new black government came into power. And obviously, people like Ahmad Qasim, who was also sent to jail for anti-apartheid activities, myself, we were now much closer to the ruling system, to the government. Suddenly the tables had turned, and these backward clerics, priests who were in trying to curry favor with the pharaonic apartheid white racist system, suddenly had to change their tune. And it was a very, very difficult time for them, I'm sure. For me and for us, our generation, this was a time of great celebration, because suddenly our people, our friends were ruling the country. People that we knew personally were in cabinet with the ministers. People whom we knew personally were the mayor of our town. And one of my commanders became a mayor of the town, one of the important towns. So this was a time of great celebration, and we all landed very, very good jobs. I myself, because it was a new system, we were given the advantage of taking up, good jobs. And I left the NGO I worked in, the NGO that was kind of also an anti-apartheid NGO. I left that NGO and I started working in a government position, semi-government position. And that is where I stayed for about 8 years. I was a government official. I was given a very plush office and executive suite, and I landed a good job. I bought a Mercedes, bought a BMW at one stage, and that was me. But you can see my roots. I was still very, very close to my deen, my days of sitting in the cell, of knowing Allah, of going to Him. When I was excommunicated, when I was chased out of the mosque, those things were very, very strong in my mind still. My brothers, my love, the love I have for my own brothers was still very, very strong. How they sent me to Egypt, how they paid for me to go there, my passage coming back, and keeping me going there, me, my wife, and my child. So that relationship was very, very strong. Some of my close friends and allies in the IUC switched to becoming Shi'i, right? They because by that time Iran had sponsored a Shi'i cleric here, and some of my close friends had opted to just jump in and become full-fledged Shi'is. I was kind of very close to the Shia. I was there. I attended the speeches, the sermons, whatever, the big nights. Went there. But I was more of a visitor. But I'm never really a visitor. When I visit something, I also feel part of it. I don't come, and there's no such a thing as a sightseer Muslim. I'm not a sightseer. I go to an event and I immerse myself. When I was a Sufi, or when I learned the Sufi ways, I was in the Sufi event, heart and soul. When I was at the Shi'i center and the Mat'am and all these, I was there, heart and soul. You understand what I'm saying? I'm there and I'm trying to feel it. And I sort of looked at the ideas of the Shia. For 2 years, when I was in the IUC, I undertook the most deepest investigation that I've ever done on anything in my life. I tried to reconcile the Shia and the Sunni, and I tried to understand where should we be, Shia, Sunni. And I had about 550 of the key sources of the Sunni mazhab or sect, and had about 10 or 12 sources of the Shia, foundational sources. And I spent almost every waking hour trying to make sense of it, and basically trying to see why I should be a Shia. That was the purpose of my investigation, was why should I be a Shia and why should I not be a Sunni? And I went as deep as I possibly could. Now, already in Egypt, I met a great Mufti of South Africa. He turned out to be a Mufti, but he was actually a youngish man. He turned out to be a Mufti. He died during COVID, unfortunately, sadly. May God bless his soul. Maulana Taha Karan. And he stayed for a year in my house. I always say these things happen, Allah makes these things happen. Maulana Taha Karan, who is the Mufti of South Africa, who turned out to be the Mufti of South Africa in one of the most prestigious organizations, shared my house. He needed a house, and I gave him a room at no charge, him and his wife. Now you can imagine the amount of questions I had for Maulana Taha Karan, because he was a light, upbeat, cheerful, friendly character, a likable character in any way you want to look at it. He was humorous. He could quip around every corner. It was great having him with me, and his wife similarly was great company for my wife also. And they spent many hours together. And I then questioned Maulana Taha, about, now this is 91, the Shia issue has already come up, and I questioned him so many things. He in fact gave me written responses to some of these things, and I can show you these written responses. A question about a particular very deeply issue about the Shia issue, and Maulana Taha was able to discuss with me. Now there are certain things that I agreed with Maulana Taha Karan in that house of mine late at night that I can never ever repeat here, because I still have love for him, and I think he built a reputation and he made a name for himself, and he became a famous cleric. But I will tell you this today. Listen to me very carefully. When you are a person like me with nothing to lose, with no institutionalization, with no big body behind you, with no people that will be disappointed in you, no Saudis will cut your funding, nobody. My brothers and sisters, you can speak the truth without fear. Listen carefully what I'm saying to you. When you are a person without an institution behind you, without the power of the whole Sunni world and the history and the money, and you can say the truth. When you have all of that behind you, you have to sometimes shut the hell up, even when you know something is true. You have to shut up. Even though you know something is true, you have to shut up. You can whisper it, but you cannot declare it publicly. Do you think that Donald Trump can declare tomorrow, let's say, the moon landing was a hoax? Do you think that he can come out and say, the moon landing was a hoax? Even if it was true. And even if it was a hoax, he can never ever say it. There's too much hanging on it. And there's too much to lose by making that declaration. Now similarly, there are scholars, mainstream scholars, that will write their books, that will make their public speeches and will say what they say, but they can never say the true, certain things that they know to be true, because they are too deeply invested in the system. And that's the difference with me. I can say what I believe to be the truth, what I am convinced to be the truth. Some people have to say all the hadiths in Bukhari are true. Others can say, no, it's not all true. Some are lies. And they won't. I think that's where the Muslim world is now, is that we can now say not all the hadiths in Bukhari are false, are true. I think it's fine. It's easy now to make that pronouncement. 50 years ago, you couldn't. So the wagon moves very slowly. But people, even at the top level, even the supreme muftis, they know sometimes something is true and they can't say it in public. And that is what I want to say about Maulana Taha Karan. For a year, we stayed together. He slept in a room in my house. We spent endless hours discussing and debating, and the Shia issue came up very much. I obviously questioned him a lot about the Deobandi school. He was from Deoband. He just came fresh from Deoband. And I could really interrogate him, and I could also learn about the minhaj, of the Deoband minhaj, which is not too far apart from the Salafist minhaj. But they do accept madhabs, of course. So let me just catch up on where I was, because I want to move to the philosophy minhaj idea. So the years of the IUC were actually great years. I was felt comfortable in there. I was at home finally. I was a member of the National Ulama Council. I appeared on radio. I had my regular radio slot every second day or every week, 3 times or so. And people enjoyed the material. It was great. The radio station, we could promote our vision, which was a more rationalist vision. Of course, the mainstream clergy always had poison for us. At every corner they would condemn or criticize our leaders. I might just add that today I'm still very proud of that achievement. But unfortunately, a major shift happened in around 2011, 2013. I think by that time, the romance, of the change in the country, which 94 till about 2010, it wore out. And there were also a bunch of opportunists that joined the Islamic Unity Convention, people who were there for the wrong reason. And that whole thing started grinding into problems. And the whole institution was kind of in the grip of infighting. It was very demoralizing to see how something which I viewed as so important, this expression of Islam, which was like a mix of Shia ideas, a mix of revolutionary Marxist ideas, a mix of Sunni ideas, a mix of Al-Ghazali's ideas. All of these came together in the IUC. The IUC was kind of a mixed bag, a melting pot of Shia ideas, communist ideas, Marxist ideas, revolutionary ideas, but also Sufi ideas. So that was this organization that we created, which fell into disarray by about 2010, 2011, 2012. And by that time, I was not involved there. I left that organization 5 years before, 6 years before. My career was, actually I started the company. I left government service. I started my own company, my own business, retail. And they called me back. Somebody called me back to say, listen, this thing is in such a mess. We need somebody who could take the chairmanship of this thing that is in a mess. And I said, I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go. I mean, being a chairman of the IUC, came with a lot of prestige. Maybe that was one of the things that drew me to it. Allah knows best. We are humans. But little did I know how demoralizing that new adventure of mine would be. It was one of the most demoralizing episodes in my life when I went back to a Muslim organization that used to be my favorite group, but now entangled in interpersonal problems, financial, because there was money now and financial fight over money. And I was in the middle of a row over money, over personalities. And for 2 years I was caught there. My friends became my enemies. My friends, my best friends, I can just say my best friends, the people I trusted the most, turned on me and discarded me as an opportunist, as a gold digger, as somebody who's there for the opportunism, for money, for whatever. There was a massive court case between the IUC, who was taken to court by the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. Now, in South Africa, the strongest Zionist institution is the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. And this massive, powerful, well-funded institution, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, they wanted to bring the radio station down, Radio 786, and they had this powerful lawsuit in which they wanted the radio to be shut down. And they poured tens of millions into shutting down this radio station, and they took the radio to court. Well, not to court, actually to a tribunal that is, set up to adjudicate over broadcasting institutions. As good as court. If your license is revoked, you're gone. And I was involved with that also. And when I faced this challenge between the radio station and South African Jewish Board of Deputies, I saw, I'm going to explain it here because my friends who are here in locally with me, they still judge me for this, but maybe I should use this opportunity to explain this. You see, when we were faced with the Jewish Board of Deputies, with the Zionists of South Africa, trying to shut the radio down, I was then sort of a chairman, right? I was chairman, and the radio regarded me as the chairman. I felt that, you see, the challenge against Radio 786 was that it was anti-Semitic, and that it had allowed an anti-Semitic person, Jacob Zaki, or what is his other name? Any case, James Dickey from Scotland. James Dickey appeared on Radio 786 and had made statements that would made the Holocaust seem less important. And so they charged the radio station with anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, etc. And I was now in the driver's seat. I was the chairman, and the radio came to me and said, what is the defense strategy? What is the defense strategy? The previous strategy was that we want to take on the Holocaust. We want to take on the fact that the Holocaust, sort of denying that we were anti-Holocaust, that we denied the Holocaust. And my new strategy was, and this is for everyone now also, local listeners, I said, why would we want to challenge whether the Holocaust happened or not? Because with that kind of challenge, now, there's a lot of nuances here. I'm perhaps not able to give you the detailed nuts and bolts, but the previous strategy was that we're not going to concede the Holocaust. So in other words, we're going to respond to the charge that we are anti-Semites by not conceding the Holocaust. So that was part of the defense strategy. And I said, let's change the strategy. Let's concede the Holocaust and then claim free speech, that we have the right to have a speaker that questions it. But we as a radio station, we concede the Holocaust, because that was really what it was coming down to. Now, people judge me for conceding the Holocaust, but I always say that if the Holocaust caused the death of 1 million gypsies and, Jews and other minorities, it's still a Holocaust. If the Gaza genocide is a Holocaust. So I said, we don't deny the Holocaust because there was obviously a major crime committed. Right? Hitler was a criminal. Please don't you think you can argue and convince me that Hitler was not a criminal? He was a self-centered, conceited, narcissistic criminal. But he wasn't all that the Jews are trying to make of him, right? So I mean, I say he was bad, and he was bad, but he was not the personification of all evil in the world. There probably will be and have been more evil people than Hitler. By changing the strategy, we actually settled that case within a year, and we had a request from the Jewish Board of Deputies that we just air something that sounds like an apology, and that would settle it. Now, till that time, we've already spent 12 million on the case. I looked at the figures, and we were going to spend another 12 million, which were precious community resources. And I said, we're not going to bleed this community any further. The 12 million is enough. On the Jewish Board of Deputies side, they spent $250 million. We got inside information that they spent $250 million because they have limitless supplies of funds. Whereas we're a community station, and we're even not the mainstream, we're peripheral. The mainstream Muslims are not involved. They never supported this radio. They wanted us to die. But in any case, we settled that case. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I was judged by my best colleagues in the struggle. I was suddenly, all my struggle credentials, all my years of losing my freedom, of being locked up, of being running away from the cops, of carrying out the orders of my commanders, faithfully, all that was suddenly scratched out, and I was turned into a pariah by my own comrades. It was the most demoralizing time, the second most demoralizing time of my life. And I went into a lot of pain. I tried to make sense of, before that I wrote a book. Even when I was at the IUC, I wrote a book called Our Jihad. There's the book. I wrote that book when I was in IUC. It contains a lot of ideas, and I tried to make sense of the Shia, Sunni, all the ideas. I tried to create one Islam out of all these ideas. But now, one of my comrades even said, "Listen, you and your book can go to hell," or whatever. It was a painful time when my own Muslim comrades turned against me. I made a very honorable withdrawal from all these things, and I pulled out and I patched up my relationship with both sides, I think, hopefully. And by 2016 or 17, or actually 2013, 14, I made a very honorable withdrawal. And I became reclusive. I sat at home. I had all these books now. I went into the Shia ideas, and I couldn't get myself to accepting that the Shia worldview is persuasive enough. Right? So I was still a seeker. And I decided I'm going to continue my studies, and I enrolled for a doctorate in education. Because what is knowledge? What is knowledge? And only a doctorate in education will help me understand what knowledge is. And I should learn from the best. So my base of research was at the best university in Africa, which is the University of Cape Town, which is also one of the top 500 global universities. And the partner university was the University of Liverpool, which is in the top 50 universities of the world. And I had a professor from the University of Liverpool who helped and guided me through making sense of the world. And my field of study was decolonization, decolonizing the mind and society. And I went very, very deep with my education research. I went very deep into what is the mind, what is knowledge, how does knowledge affect our actions, where does the impetus come for knowledge? Is when everyone says something, is that knowledge? When my neighbor and all my neighbors do something and I do it, is that knowledge? Is that the right thing to do? And I went into the philosophy of knowledge, and my professor, seeing my confusion, said to me, "Look, you should look at the work of Roy Bhaskar. You should look at critical realism, because I do believe you are anchored in some truths, but there's certain questions about whether everything is lethic truth or axiomatic truths." Now, in Islam, we obviously we cannot in any way question certain core beliefs, like God is, and there is no way that God cannot be. That is an lethic truth. It is an axiomatic truth. It is a truth we don't ask for proof. We have pointers here. We have pointers, and we have clues. And that is what the Qur'an says. There are ayat, there are hints, there are clues, there are signs. It's almost like a circumstantial evidence. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence for God, but there is no smoking gun, and that's a fact. But you see, you need to. What critical realism does, it encapsulates or incorporates additional forms of arriving at truths. And one of the additional forms is exactly that, circumstantial evidence, retroduction. And retroduction, instead of deduction and induction, which is logical forms of reasoning, retroduction is inferring the reality of a being, of being, by the clues that point to it. So we can prove, or we can establish, or we can infer God by using retroductive means of reasoning. It's also part of reasoning, and in fact the courts use circumstantial evidence every day. There's no court that cannot incorporate retroductive or circumstantial evidence. There's always cases where they need to have a very strong balance of probabilities. I'm giving you an insight into the kind of minhaj, or the way I see knowledge, and which I incorporated within obtaining my doctorate in education in the year 2020. And then I think I was just before my 60th birthday. It was actually 4 years before my 60th birthday. I got very sick with COVID. I was lying in bed and I almost thought I was going to die. I never went to the hospital though. I never trusted the hospitals. And I stayed at home being sick. I treated myself with certain, zinc and vitamin D and whatever, steaming. And I got out of COVID, and I said to my brother, my dear beloved brother, eldest brother, I said to him, brother, I think I almost died, and I'm worried. I'm worried that I've accomplished this doctorate, and I've gone back to my deen, and I've gone back to the Qur'an, and I think I've figured it out. Is that we need to apply this expanded way of reasoning, not just narrow reasoning, not just the reasoning of a scientist, of scientism, to the Quran, but we need to apply an expanded way of reasoning, including retroduction. So critical realism, I think, is the way to read the Quran and to understand Islam. And my faithful, dear, beloved brother, he said to me, Anwar, let's start a college. He said to me, let's start a college. You become the teacher, you lecture. We'll get the funds. He has the funds, and he could raise more funds. And in 2021, I think we were ready to start the college. I had the blueprints, I had all the plans, and we had a few meetings to start a new college. We would do an advanced diploma in Islamic studies or Quran studies. And I said, look, before we start a paid college, let's run a pilot run with a few family members. Let's let a few friends of us start something. We were about 25 and we started an online Zoom thing. At that time, there was still a bit of a lockdown, remember? 2021. And we had a Zoom thing. And I started thinking, why don't we actually use YouTube? And I started also covering much more contentious issues like the Jewish influence on Islamic law. And suddenly that video just took off, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw 100 people, 200. We were just a group of 25, and suddenly 200, 300, 400, 1,000 people were watching these videos. And I said to my brother, you know what? I don't think we should start the college. I don't think we can reach as many people with a college as we can reach here. We can do an advanced Islamic philosophical theme on YouTube. And my brothers and sisters, that is where it came. But obviously can add a lot more on the minhaj and so on. But I've always seen myself as a humble seeker of knowledge. I have a lot to thank my good, powerful, mighty Creator for, who stood by me in difficult times. Right now, I'm not out of the woods. I was diagnosed with the worst painful disease known to man, trigeminal neuralgia. Trigeminal neuralgia, the thing that you don't go to hell for because you're in hell already when you have that. But I sit here and I take my pills and I do what I must do, and I take the pain when it strikes me, and I say to Allah, you have a plan for me, my great Lord, my Master, my Supreme Lord, whom I've always trusted, and you've brought me into a difficulty, and you always bring me out of the difficulty as long as I serve you. My translation of the Quran, which I've been working on for 3 years, is about 70% complete. I apply the method of critical realism. I apply the method of looking rationally at the verses. I'm not averse to the unseen. People tell me, you don't believe in a jinn. Yes, I believe there's jinn, but I also believe you can see more meanings in that word jinn. It's not just a fire demon. Or if you say, Anwar, you don't believe in Salah. Yes, I believe Salah is there, it's in the Quran. But we need to look for more meaning in Salah than you are trying to do. You're trying to reduce the Salah to up and down, up and down, up and down. Maybe there's more to it. The Quran doesn't say the up and down story. It says you must yield, you must bow, you must do all of this. Yes, there's a convention. We follow the convention. That's fine. I don't have a problem following the convention. There's no, people tell me, you don't believe in Jumu'at. There's a convention for Jumu'at, but Salatul Jumu'at is not in the Quran. So unless you want to make the Hadith equal to the Quran, then you get to where you are now, a backward, messed up, problematic world community that can never get out of that morass, that mud. You see, you need to get out of the Hadith mud. And I'm not saying all Hadiths are evil, and I'm not saying I don't believe that any, but currently it is a muddy situation. You need to first master the Quran. And when you've mastered the Quran, read the Quran cover to cover with understanding, and don't read Yusuf Ali. You read a nice, understandable translation. Muhammad Asad is there. Who's that guy that translated the clear Quran is there. There's a few others that are easy to understand. First, read the Quran in English, and then you start arguing with me about hadiths in the comment section. My friends, I think I've carried on longer than I should have. No videos, no Quran verses, nothing here except me talking and becoming a bit emotional today. But I love you all. I love your comments. I'm just me. I'm not a guy that's trying to make money out of this. Yes, you can become a member. Because I spend many hours on this. If you become a member and you sign 299 Rand, 190 or $10 or $1 a month, you're helping me complete my translation of the Quran, and you're helping me to pay for some of the time. Because when I'm spending time making this video, I have to put time aside that I'm doing for my regular job where I'm earning a real income from. For those who do sponsor, for those who have become members, I say to you again, I'm eternally grateful to you. Shukran. I'm not mentioning your names. You know who you are. To those who fund me on a monthly basis, I'm also grateful to you, my brother, my eldest brother. Eternally grateful for you. May Allah bless you more. May Allah bless us all and guide us to the right path. And I will speak more in the next video. Obviously, you can't cover everything in one video, but I think I've given you the gist of who I am. Shukran. Wassalamu alaikum.